Hello everybody, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the YWAM Tyler Audio Podcast. This will actually be our last episode for a while because we want to direct your attention to a video devotional series that we're working on. So please feel free to check in with us. Our website is www.ywamtyler.org. Check it out. It's going to be a really, really good thing. This episode is a fantastic message on how to deal with anxiety and the overwhelming flood of information in this culture and society we live in. You don't want to miss this. So stay in tune. This episode is a little longer than usual, but it's worth it. Also, I want to thank everybody who came to the Inspire Worship and Missions Conference. It was a fantastic time of honoring the Lord. Also, if you want to have more information about next year's Inspire Conference, please feel free to go to ywamtyler.org and it will direct you to it. So God bless you guys and enjoy this episode.
But I want to talk about overcoming an age of anxiety, because the world in which we live, which is a globalized reality, in other words, we're globally connected through everything from social media, communication, technology, transportation. We are the most globally connected generation in history. So right now you can all pull out a device and talk to somebody in India, China, Korea, Azerbaijan. You can instantaneously connect with the rest of the world. That means we also instantaneously have a feed of information coming to us from the rest of the world. And we're constantly filtering out a barrage of information from all the peoples of the world. So we're being bombarded moment by moment by politics and economics and social structure and the rise and fall of worldview and the dynamics of how it's affecting all the peoples of the planet. It's a constant barrage of information. And because we're a fast urbanizing generation, we're also being put literally in geographic proximity to all of that information. So right now, over half of the world's population, for the first time in history, lives in these intense urban environments. It's increasing by 1.5 million a week. By 2050, 70% of the world will live in a city. At the current rate, by the end of this century, 90% of nearly 14 billion people on the planet will live in a major urban environment. So God's rewriting the human story. But in that means that we're being put in proximity to all the diversity of the human story, including all of its brokenness, including all the things that threaten us by it, including all the things that are out of my control. And this is the first generation in human history that is overwhelmed by so much information that they can't assimilate, they can't understand, and they cannot control. And it's having an impact. It's having an impact on those that we're trying to mobilize into mission. It's having an impact on the church even, and how it sees itself and the impact that it can make in the world. This age of anxiety is having an impact on the choices you make on a day-to-day basis. And it's having an impact on how we can develop faith and its impact on the rest of the world. And I just want to encourage us tonight. I believe God has an answer for this. As a matter of fact, what I want to encourage us with tonight is something I believe that the Lord has given us, that if we can embrace this, it not only brings victory and freedom for us, but I believe the church needs to create leadership in an age of anxiety. Because in an age of anxiety, there's a lot of voices. There's a lot of people saying what needs to happen, what doesn't need to happen, and they're evaluating their choices based on the resources at hand. They're evaluating what can or cannot be done based on their worldview, and the church needs to create leadership in that dialogue. And we need to have a different spirit than the rest of the world. And you cannot attract a generation to take risk and go to the nations, and you cannot give a generation enough faith to take risk and go to the nations, and you can't even keep that generation here long enough to go to the nations unless we can overcome an age of anxiety and have leadership to help others overcome the same. But if we do that, we need to understand when this generation comes here to this training, mobilizing entity, you need to know what's going on, what's fueling their self-awareness, the reality and the grid and the worldview that they're struggling with, even unconsciously. When they come into our training centers, they are bringing with them a set of glasses that is now connected to an age of anxiety. And it will affect everything they do. It will affect how you disciple them. It will affect how they receive the information you're giving them. It will affect what they do with it once they get it. It will affect how well we will mobilize the next mission force into the world. And here's some of the ways this affects us. Globalization, urbanization affects our view of reality. Because the globalized urban generation is struggling with a sense of limited resources. The buzzword in the humanitarian world is we're too many. There's too many of us and not enough resources. We don't have enough water. We don't have enough food. It's the unsustainability of the human race. That's the buzzword right now. And that fuels a worldview. It gets inside our psyche. There's not enough resources. And we begin to respond with a level of anxiety. I can't take risk because I don't have enough resources. And if I give you some of my resources, how do I get it back? Because there's not enough to replenish it. And this is affecting a worldview. So when you look at somebody in this generation and you say, take risk with God, they immediately filter that comment through a grid that says, well, what do I have to offer? I've got these things and these things and these things, but if I give you some of these things, I've got no way of replacing it. It's an overwhelming sense of limited resource. And we're making choices based on what we have, not based on what God can give us. And all of our political systems and our social economic arguments and even our immigration arguments are being filtered through a lens of limited resource. And nothing in the Bible describes a worldview of limited resource. The biblical worldview is unlimited resource. That when you walk in obedience, God always provides what you need. That when you give away in obedience, God always replaces. But how are you going to fit that into the head of somebody in this generation that they're bombarded daily by images of people who don't have enough food, images of people who don't have enough clean water, images of incredible poverty, 1 out of 5 people in the world living in an urban slum? What does that say to this generation? Somewhere along the line, we lost our resources. And you're asking them to give up some of their precious resources? And they look at you with this blank stare of, you got to be kidding me. I can't give up my resources. Who's going to give it back to me? Another thing that affects this generation is there's an intense struggle with injustice of the powerful and the helplessness of the weak. Because an urbanized world that sees mass injustice, and the injustice always comes from those who are most powerful. Those who are powerful are controlling and exploiting the weak. And what that says to this generation, anybody who has the bulk of resources is exploiting somebody else to keep it. And that's affecting people. Now we have a grid. We have people that come on this ministry, and the first thing they do unconsciously is put all of us in certain camps. Well, you're the over-resourced. You're the under-resourced. You must be doing something wrong to keep these from getting anything. That's a worldview. It's a grid. They don't even know they're doing it. But this generation struggles with trust and struggles with trusting anything that looks powerful or successful. Bottom line, this generation looks at the world and the state of the world and says anything that is successful ran over somebody to get there. And yet Scripture says that God is willing to make us fruitful and successful for the kingdom, and we don't need a generation unable to engage that successfulness and fruitfulness because they're afraid to be the oppressor. You literally have a generation that doesn't want to be successful. They want to do things, but they don't want it to be too fruitful because that puts them in the camp. Now I must be the oppressor. It's this unconscious inability to run with faith and conquer and possess. They'd rather talk about possession than actually do it. We talk about possessing, but we don't really want to be the possessor, because if I'm a possessor, I just became the man. You see? And this is a struggle, a deep struggle. This generation also is overwhelmingly inundated by options. And they have an awareness that they don't know enough to make a good decision. This is incredibly deep within the heart of this generation. When you live in a globalized, urbanized world, there is endless amount of choices to make. Endless amount of options. Only they are overwhelmed by the reality that I'm too stupid to make the best one. There's too much information, so I can't know enough. In other words, if I have 100 options, but I only have time to research 5 of them, I don't make any choice because I'm afraid that if I choose the best of those 5, I actually missed the best because the other 95 I didn't have time to research is where the really good one was. So I want to make a choice. This is not a generation who doesn't want to commit. It's a generation who is not able to commit because they're afraid that they will commit to the wrong thing. That there's some information out there I still need. So we go through endless experiences to accumulate as much information before I ever commit to anything. So let me go around the world at least 100 times, try at least 1,000 different projects, do a lot of different stuff before I make a commitment to anything. Because I need more information. I need more experience. I can't make a decision. Because the moment I make it, somebody else is going to come along and they had the good thing and I didn't know about it. It's creating a generation unable to rush into anything. You see that? And it's making an effect on this generation. We're also inundated with intense images of loss and the fear of future loss. We're experiencing loss as a generation, but we're also inundated with loss. We see it on all of our social media. We see it in our poetic and artistic environment. We see it in the social structures around us. We see intense loss. And I'm overwhelmed by the fact that that might happen to me, or if it has already happened to me, it might happen again. And we don't know what to do about that. This looming fear of a possibility of a loss I cannot handle and I cannot control. We also feel incredibly small and insignificant. When you're living in a city of 25 million people, when you're going back and forth and commuting to work and you have to pass thousands of people every day, a sea of humanity, and you live in these apartment complexes and slums that are just crowded with people, you feel small. Or when you turn on your TV and you see crowds and seas of humanity, or when you look at your social media and you hear all this chatter going on and all this communication and you're not in the middle of it. And even if you try to get it in the middle of it, there'd be 1,000 other chatter going on that you don't have time to get in the middle of. You feel small. You feel insignificant and forgotten. And you fight to be heard because your existence is dependent upon being heard. See, when I joined YWAM, existentialism of the 60s, 70s, and 80s was, I experienced, therefore I am. I experienced something, therefore I know I'm alive. So I just got to do everything. I'll just be wild and experience as much. And if there's any experience out there I haven't done yet, I need to do it because that's how I know I'm alive. The existentialism of today is, I am heard, therefore I know I'm alive. That's why you become addicted to the share button on all your social media. Every one of us has to share something at least 10 times a day. And then you know you're addicted because you got to go back and find out how many people commented on it and how many people shared what you shared. Because you don't know you're alive unless somebody has read your comment and shared it with somebody else. The existentialism of today is, I'm heard, therefore I am. The problem with that is when you live in an intensely populated, overcrowded environment, you can't shout loud enough to feel like you're being heard adequately. So you feel small and you're not sure if you're really living. And you're pretty sure everybody else is living and you're not. And you are overwhelmed by this. And some of you in this room here cannot go to bed every night without making sure somebody saw or heard something you did. And that's an overwhelming anxiety that eats us up. All of these things create a debilitating fear and a propensity towards self-protection. So what we have in this generation, because we're overwhelmed by all these things, we have fear of the future, fear of circumstances, fear of potential things that could happen, and it tempts us to self-protect, to insulate, to take control of what I have and not let anybody, there's a threatened security on this generation. Everybody feels like I have a limited number of pie pieces, and everybody's got their fingers on my pie pieces. And don't take my pie piece because it's the only one I got. And so every time anybody asks you to do anything, you evaluate how big your pie piece is and whether that person's trying to take it away from you. And so our lives become this existence of constantly looking at, I got to go back, how much pie I got left? Well, okay, I got this much left, great. And every time I give away, I'm not sure whether I'm ever going to get it replenished. And this creates an attitude of self-protection. And God says, I want to give you the nations. God says, I want to finish this thing I've started. God is ready to do it. And he's a God of endless resource. And we have a grid that says, I don't know if I can do that, God. I don't have enough energy. I don't have enough resource. I don't have enough friends. I'm not heard enough. I'm a nobody. I don't think I can handle that kind of loss. I wouldn't know what to do if it happened to me. I can't go, God. I'm not equipped enough. I don't have it. And then we're debilitated. We're living in the greatest opportunity of world mission. Yes, some of the hardest places are left, but God has done everything for us. He's created so much access for us to the unreached. He's created so much opportunity, but we are debilitated by an age of anxiety. And I want to encourage you that God wants to give us an overcoming spirit in this. That if you in this room identify with any of this, God wants to give you an overcoming spirit that you are free from that anxiety. And he wants to do it so much in our ministry that every person who steps on this base, we can bring them to a place of freedom where they are completely available to God without any concern of who's got a hold of their pie piece.